In this video, I want to talk to you about why therapy doesn't work for everyone. Before we get to that though, I just want to take a moment and say up front that obviously I'm not saying that therapy doesn't work. Whenever I've spoken about this in the past, you always get those keyboard warriors who see the title and immediately lose their shit, jumping straight into the comments to go on about how someone's wrong on the internet. Calm down, that's not what I'm saying. Obviously therapy's had an amazing impact on countless people's lives, so I'm not dismissing that. What I want to talk to you about instead is the people that it hasn't helped. And to really understand that, we need to just take a moment and talk to you about the way that your brain's actually programmed. You see, at any moment in time, there's millions of different things going on around you, from the feel of the shirt on your body, the taste in your mouth, all of these sounds and these smells. There's no possible way for your brain to process them all, and that's why instead it generalizes it, it chunks it down, and it gives you this mold of the world based on what it recognizes is important to you. And this will explain why, if you ever thought of buying a new car, suddenly you see it everywhere, or if you get a new shirt, suddenly everyone else is wearing it. It's not that it wasn't there before, but it wasn't important to you, so your brain filtered it out. And that's a perfect example of your mind focusing on something that recognizes it important to you and giving you more of it. To take that a step further, what I want to do is a quick little exercise with you, and this is going to seem a little bit silly, but just humor me for a moment. What I want you to do is stop, close your eyes, and in a moment, I want you to focus on anything except a blue elephant. Focus on absolutely anything except a blue elephant. And what immediately pops into your head? A blue elephant. And the reason why that happens is because your unconscious mind can't process negatives. And this is really important to understand, because when you focus on what you don't want, that's what you get more of. And that was why when I told you not to focus on it, that was the first thing that popped into your head. And this is why it's so important that we start taking responsibility for our focus, because so often what we focus on can sabotage us. And I'll give you a couple of more examples. It's like with someone who wants to lose weight. What are they focusing on? Well, they're focusing on, I don't want to be fat, I don't want to be fat, I don't want to be fat. So what do they get more of? Or someone who's struggling with anxiety. They're focusing on, I don't want to be anxious, I don't want to be anxious, I don't want to be anxious. So what do they become? More anxious. And this is why it's so important to recognize what story's actually going on in our head. And this takes me back to my original statement of why therapy doesn't work for everyone. Because what happens when you go into therapy or counseling? You sit down and you talk about the past. You focus on something that happened and reliving it over and over again in your head. And that's the reason why you can't let go and move on. I'll give you an example. I had a client come to me who for 5 years had been going to therapy every single week, trying to get closure, to let go of what happened, but they just couldn't leave it behind them. But the problem was every single week they were going in, they were focusing on what happened and talking about it, meaning they were replaying it over and over again in their head. And this is why when I'm working with my clients, what we do instead is turn it on its head. Instead of focusing on the past, what we do is shift their focus to the future, because the biggest lesson to learn is you can't change what happened, but what you can do is change how you respond to it going forward. And once you realize that, that's when you can start setting yourself free. And that's why with that client that I just mentioned, we achieved more in an hour-and-a-half session than they did in 5 years of therapy. Why? Because rather than them focusing on the past and something that was out of their control and blaming themselves for it, instead we empowered them to get them to see that they couldn't change it. But what they could do was in that moment realize that they could take back control of how they're going to respond to it going forward. Because once you get that shift in the way that you think and feel, and you see that you've got the ability to choose how you respond to any given situation, that's when you can become unstoppable. I think this is why it's so important that we take the time to really understand why we think and feel the way that we do, because so often we let that story in our head hold us back from going after what we really want. And all that is your past conditioning sabotaging your future success by building up that story in your head. But like I said before, your past doesn't have to define your future, but In order to really let it go and move on, we have to get to the root cause of the problem. We need to understand why you've taken on this story in the first place, because once we get to the mental roadblock, that's when we can remove it. We can reverse the thoughts and stories in your head and change the way that you think and feel about yourself. And once you do that, that's when you'll become unstoppable. So I really want you to take a moment and think about what I've spoken to you about in this video. Honestly, ask yourself, what are you focusing on? Are you reliving the past over and over again in your head? And is that the reason why you haven't been able to let go and move on? And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Your past doesn't have to define your future, and you've got the ability to choose how you respond to any given situation. And once you realize that, that's when you'll become unstoppable. I'm Byron Morrison, author of the book Become a Better You. Thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you soon.